Why did silence always feel heavier after anger? That question would haunt him long after the dust had settled. The corridor still smelled of gun oil and stale air, a claustrophobic artery of gray metal and concrete. Boots scuffed, voices hushed. Somewhere, a vent rattled, carrying the desert's heat through the steel bones of the outpost. Private Marcus Hale stood frozen, his pulse hammering in his throat, eyes locked on the woman he'd just shoved into the wall. He didn't even understand why he'd done it. Maybe because the day had been too long, or because the orders were senseless, or because grief had nowhere else to go. Or maybe because he thought she was just another officer, another distant voice wrapped in uniform cloth, untouchable and unfeeling. But she was. She didn't look like command. Her jacket bore no stripes, no medals, just a plain service coat, creased and dusted from travel. No bodyguards, no entourage. She had walked into the base alone, the first mistake, he thought. What kind of officer walks into a unit without introducing herself? When she stopped him, he snapped. "Out of my way," he had growled, low and sharp, eyes flaring. And when she didn't move, when she met his fury with silence, something inside him broke. His hand shot forward before thought could stop it. The impact had echoed. Now his breath was shallow. The men around them stood frozen in the corridor. The air itself seemed to tremble. Then someone whispered, "What the hell, Hale?" Another voice, uncertain, afraid, said, "He just shoved a co." Marcus blinked. "A what?" The woman straightened her jacket. The faintest tremor in her hand betrayed what the rest of her face refused to show. Calm, steady, almost sorrowful. When she finally spoke, her voice cut through the tension like a blade drawn from a sheath. "I am Admiral Cross," she said, "and you, Private Hale, have just laid hands on your commanding officer." The corridor went dead quiet. Not even the vents dared whisper. Marcus's mind didn't register the words at first. They just floated in the silence, hollow and impossible. Then they hit him all at once. Admiral. He stepped back. "Ma'am, I didn't." But she raised a hand, not to silence him, but to still him, like one might calm a wounded animal. "Enough." Her tone was soft, but it carried authority that didn't need to shout. The senior officer beside them looked like he wanted to disappear. "Admiral, I'll handle this." "No," she said, "you won't." Her gaze stayed on Marcus, studying him not as a criminal, but as a puzzle she meant to understand. The weight of her stare made him feel seen in a way that was unbearable, as though she could read every crack in his armor, every scar he tried to hide. She stepped closer. "Strength without discipline is weakness," she said quietly. "Anger without cause is chaos." He swallowed hard. "With respect, ma'am, you don't know my cause." "Then tell me," she replied, eyes steady. He couldn't, because the truth was too tangled, too ugly. He'd lost friends under bad orders, watched blood soak into dust while command sat safe behind screens miles away. He had seen leadership fail, again and again. And he had blamed every uniform above his own. Now, standing before one, a woman whose calm unnerved him more than any yelling could, he felt the weight of his mistake settle like lead. The others were watching, judgment in every glance. He wanted to disappear, to crawl into the cracks of the concrete. But she didn't dismiss him. She didn't call for guards. She simply looked at him and said, "Courage is learning to stand after you've fallen." Then she extended her hand. He stared at it, confused. "Show me," she said, "that you can rise." Something in her tone wasn't command, it was challenge. A test not of obedience but of character. He hesitated. Then slowly he took her hand. Her grip was firm, steady, not forgiving, not condemning, just human. Applause rippled faintly from the back of the corridor, awkward at first, then stronger. Someone started clapping, another joined, until the air trembled not with tension but with something else. Relief. Respect. Marcus dropped his gaze. "Ma'am, I'm—" "Not forgiven," she interrupted softly. "Not yet, earn it." She turned and walked away. her boots echoing down the corridor like a drumbeat of control regained. The officers around her followed, leaving Marcus in the hollow silence that remained. He leaned against the same wall he'd shoved her into moments ago, feeling its cold press against his back. A strange emptiness filled his chest. Not fear, not guilt, something deeper, shame woven with admiration. He didn't know who Admiral Evelyn Cross really was, but something told him she wasn't like the others. That night he couldn't sleep. The desert wind rattled the tin roof above the barracks. The hum of the generator outside was steady, almost comforting, but his mind was not. He replayed the moment again and again, the look in her eyes, the calm in her voice, the offer of her hand. He had expected fury. Instead, he'd found restraint. And restraint was far more powerful than rage. "Man, you're lucky she didn't court-martial you on the spot," his bunkmate murmured from across the dim room. Marcus didn't answer. "She's new, right?" the man continued. "Word is she transferred from Fleet Command, used to run intelligence ops. People say she's cold as ice." "Doesn't seem cold to me," Marcus muttered. "Oh, then what?" He didn't have the words for it. Stillness, maybe. Like she carried weight the rest of them couldn't see. The barracks fell silent again, but Marcus stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed faintly, a convoy returning maybe, or a medical evac. Life at the outpost went on, mission after mission, day after day, but something inside him had shifted. The next morning the air was heavy with heat. Formation stood sharp under the rising sun, rows of soldiers in perfect lines. Then she appeared. Admiral Cross walked across the yard, simple uniform, no display of rank, no escort. Her eyes moved over the lines of soldiers, not as a ruler inspecting her subjects, but as someone measuring weight, fatigue, spirit. She paused when she reached Marcus. He held her gaze, jaw tight. "Private Hale," she said evenly. "Report to my office after formation." A dozen heads turned toward him. A few whispers hissed through the ranks. He just nodded. "Yes, ma'am." When the formation dismissed, he walked toward the command wing, every step heavier than the last. Her office was nothing like he expected. No polished desk, no awards gleaming on the walls. Just a simple map pinned across one side, marked with red zones and blue lines. A kettle steamed quietly in the corner. "Sit," she said without looking up. He did. The silence stretched until it felt unbearable. Finally she spoke. "Why did you enlist, Private?" He blinked. "Ma'am. It's a simple question." He hesitated. "Because my father did, and my brother." "And where are they now?" He stared at the floor. "One buried in Cunnar, the other never came home." She nodded slowly. "So you fight because you're angry?" He looked up, startled. "Because I want to make it mean something." Her eyes softened just slightly. "Grief doesn't need meaning, Private. It needs peace. And peace doesn't come from violence. It comes from control." He looked away. "Easy for you to say, Admiral. You haven't lost men on the ground." She paused, then quietly, "You're wrong." Something flickered across her face, brief, pained, gone in an instant. She turned toward the map. 5 years ago, I led a recon unit through Norvac Valley. I ordered them to hold position overnight. Command said the valley was clear." Her hand trembled slightly on the map. "By dawn, only 2 came back." Marcus said nothing. "So don't tell me I haven't lost men," she continued, voice low, steady. "I've lost names, people I swore to protect. That's why I'm here, to stop it from happening again." Silence. Marcus swallowed hard. "Then why not court-martial me?" She faced him fully now. "Because punishment teaches fear, but you already know fear. What you need is discipline." He met her eyes. "And if I fail again?" "Then you'll answer for it," she said. "But if you learn, you'll lead." Her words lingered in the air like smoke. He didn't know why, but something inside him cracked open, the anger, the guilt. All of it tangled into something new, understanding. When she dismissed him, he walked out feeling smaller and larger at once. That evening, Evelyn sat alone in her quarters. The desert light bled through the thin curtains, painting her desk gold. She removed her jacket and exhaled slowly, shoulders aching from the day. A soft knock at the door interrupted the silence. "Come in," she said. It was Commander Reeves, her second-in-command, older, worn, eyes sharp. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am." She gave a small nod. "You should have written Hail up," he said. "Rules are rules. You can't afford leniency this early in command." Evelyn leaned back. "And what would that teach him?" "That we have standards." Her eyes flicked toward him, calm but firm. "Standards are not the same as understanding." Reeves frowned. "Ma'am, the troops need to see strength." "They will," she said softly, "but not the kind that comes from fear." He studied her for a moment, then sighed. "You're walking a fine line, Admiral." "I know." When he left, she sat in silence again. Her hand brushed the old, worn dog tags she kept in a small tin box beside her bed. She opened it. 2 names engraved. 2 men she'd lost in Norvac Valley. She whispered their names under her breath, a quiet promise to lead differently this time. Out on the training field, Marcus stood under the fatting sun, rifle slung low, eyes distant. His anger hadn't vanished, but something else had taken root. A question. What did she see in him worth saving? He didn't have an answer yet, but tomorrow he'd start trying to find one. And somewhere in the still heat of that desert evening, the story of 2 soldiers, one burdened by command, one haunted by loss, began to intertwine. Because sometimes, the first lesson of strength isn't how to fight. It's how to rise after you fall. How do you rebuild respect once it's broken? That question hung between them like dust in the sunlight, unseen yet everywhere. Morning came hard and bright. The desert wind had teeth, biting through fatigues as if trying to scrape the weakness from every soldier it touched. Out on the training field, Marcus Hale stood in formation again, sweat already gathering at his collar, eyes forward, heartbeat steady but wary. Since yesterday, the base had changed. Not in noise or routine, but in temperature. A new current of discipline hummed beneath the surface, quiet but undeniable. Admiral Evelyn Cross walked the line slowly, hands behind her back, gaze sharp but thoughtful. She stopped often, too often for comfort, asking names, hometowns, missions. Most officers swept through inspection like storms. She moved like rain, soft but thorough, leaving nothing untouched. When she reached Marcus, the air seemed to tighten. "Private Hale," she said. He straightened until his spine ached. "Ma'am." Her eyes lingered on him, unreadable. "You volunteered for recon detail last rotation, didn't you?" "Yes, ma'am." "You were denied." "Yes, ma'am." He hesitated. "Command said I was too volatile." Her mouth twitched, not a smile, more like the ghost of one. "We'll test that evaluation soon enough." Then she moved on, boots crunching on gravel. The men around him shifted, stealing glances. One whispered, "She's keeping you close, man. Either she trusts you or she's waiting for you to screw up again." Marcus didn't answer. Maybe both were true. By noon, she called a briefing. The entire command wing gathered inside the operations tent, maps spread, fans rattling overhead. The outpost sat near the border of 3 fractured provinces, ground claimed by no one, haunted by everyone. Supply convoys had been ambushed twice in the last month. Intel was thin, morale thinner. Evelyn traced a finger along a red-inked canyon line. "This route," she said, "is where our relief trucks vanish. No radio calls, no survivors. Whoever's behind it knows our patterns." Commander Reeves leaned in. "We've sent drones, nothing." "Drones can't see what's buried beneath rock." Her tone carried the faintest edge. "We're going in on foot." A murmur rippled through the tent. "With respect, Admiral," Reeves said carefully, "a personal inspection is unnecessary. We can deploy Delta Team." "I'm aware of protocol." Her gaze pinned him. I'm also aware of how often protocol fails. She turned toward Marcus, standing at the back. Private Hale. Every head swiveled. "Ma'am," he said, voice dry. "You'll join the recon element. You know the terrain." Reeves frowned. "Admiral, he's under evaluation." "Good," she said. "Then let's evaluate him where it matters." For a heartbeat, Marcus thought she was punishing him. Then he saw something in her expression, something colder, deeper, trust born of necessity. The mission was set for dawn. That night the base dimmed under blackout conditions. Marcus sat outside the barracks cleaning his rifle, the metal catching the faint light of the moon. Footsteps crunched behind him. "You're either lucky or cursed," said Sergeant Lopez, dropping onto the crate beside him. "Going out there with the Admiral herself. Damn." Marcus smirked weakly. "You think she's serious about joining us?" "Word is, she requested it. Some say she's trying to prove she's not a desk officer." He checked the bolt, avoiding the question. "You ever seen Command walk into the fire before?" "Not alive," Lopez said, half laughing. Then, softer, "Don't blow this, Hale. She saw something in you none of us did." Marcus didn't answer. The sound of the desert filled the silence, low wind, distant hum of generators, the lonely creak of steel. He wiped the rifle one last time and whispered to himself, "Don't blow it." Dawn bled across the horizon, painting the dunes in bruised gold. 6 soldiers moved out, silhouettes against the rising light. Evelyn Cross leading, Marcus just behind her, Lopez on flank, and 3 scouts trailing with comm packs. The canyon ahead looked harmless from distance, a wide scar carved through stone, but locals called it the Hollow. No one who entered uninvited returned the same. Hours passed in tense silence. Evelyn's pace never faltered. She carried no visible weapon, only a sidearm and a small pack. Her eyes seemed to read the landscape like a book she'd memorized. Marcus caught himself watching her movements, the measured precision, the calm breathing. Nothing about her felt improvised. At midslope, Lopez raised a fist. Everyone froze. Tracks, faint, fresh, rubber narrow tread half buried under dust. Marcus knelt, brushing sand aside. "Convoy tires," he muttered. "Same size as ours." Evelyn crouched beside him. "Direction." "Northbound toward the ridge," he pointed, "ends here." "Which means?" she asked quietly. "They were stopped," Marcus said, "forced off course or ambushed." Her gaze lifted to the ridge's dark mouth. A narrow cut in the rock, shadowed and deep. She exhaled once. "We move in pairs, no comms until clear." They advanced, careful, deliberate. The canyon walls closed around them like jaws. The air cooled, sound swallowed by stone. Marcus's pulse drummed against his ears. Every crunch of gravel felt too loud. Then an echo, metal on stone. He spun, rifle raised. Nothing, just wind. Evelyn lifted a hand. "Hold." A moment later, the canyon erupted. A flash, then thunder. The ground heaved. Dust engulfed them. Marcus hit the deck, coughing, ears ringing. Lopez shouted something lost to the blast. Shrapnel tore into the rocks above, showering sparks. "Ambush," someone yelled. Marcus rolled to cover, firing toward the ridge. Shapes darted between boulders, figures in desert rags, rifles flashing. The air filled with chaos. Gunfire, shouted orders, the high whine of ricochets. Through it all, Evelyn moved with eerie control. She dragged a wounded scout behind cover, checked his pulse, pressed a field pack against the bleeding leg, then shouted, "Smoke! Left flank!" Her voice cut clean through panic. Marcus tossed a canister. Gray clouds billowed, swallowing sight lines. "We're pinned, Admiral," he shouted. "We need air support." "No time," she called back. "We push through." He stared, disbelief flaring. "We'll get slaughtered." "Then we move before they reload." And somehow her tone made sense even to fear. He nodded. "On 3." They broke cover as one. Bullets sliced the air like hornets. Marcus felt heat graze his arm but kept running, adrenaline burning everything else away. He reached the ridge first, turned, laid suppressing fire while the others crossed. Evelyn was last, always last, making sure every soldier cleared the canyon. When she finally climbed over the ridge, she was panting but steady. Her hand touched his shoulder. "Good call on the smoke." He blinked. "You told me to throw it." "I told you to think," she said. Then the ridge cracked underfoot, a hidden mine detonating meters away. The blast threw them both down. Marcus hit the dirt, disoriented, tasting blood. His ears rang, his vision blurred. He looked over. Evelyn was half buried under debris, motionless. "Admiral," he shouted, crawling toward her. She stirred, coughing, one arm pinned beneath rock. "I'm fine," she rasped. "You're not," he said, straining to lift the slab. It wouldn't budge. "Leave it, Hale. Get the others out." "Not happening." He wedged his rifle under the edge, using it as leverage. The metal groaned, bent. Finally, the rock shifted just enough. She pulled her arm free, wincing. Blood streaked her sleeve. For a second their eyes met, dust, pain, defiance. He said nothing. Neither did she. But something passed between them, understanding without forgiveness yet. They limped toward the others, regrouping behind the ridge. 2 wounded, none dead, a miracle. The enemy had retreated, maybe thinking the blast killed them all. Evelyn scanned the horizon, breathing hard. "We head back." Marcus frowned. "We can't, they'll track us, we have to circle south." She looked at him, sweat grit fire in her eyes. "Then lead the way, Private." He hesitated. "You're putting me in charge." "I'm giving you responsibility. There's a difference." The words hit harder than the explosion. He nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." By nightfall they reached a ruined watchpost, a skeleton of metal beams jutting from sand. They set up temporary shelter, tended wounds, rationed water. The wind howled outside like an animal circling prey. Evelyn sat apart, arm bandaged, staring into the dim flame of a small stove. Marcus approached quietly, holding 2 canteens. "You should drink," he said. She accepted, took a small sip. "You did well today." He shrugged. "I almost got us killed." Her eyes met his. "We were already being hunted. You kept us moving. That saved lives." He lowered himself beside her. The firelight flickered across their faces, softening the lines carved by exhaustion. "You could have left me on report," he said. "Why risk bringing me here?" "Because anger can burn or illuminate," she murmured. "I needed to see which yours would do." He frowned and, still deciding. Silence stretched, filled only by the sigh of wind through broken steel. After a while he said, "When you talked about Norvek Valley, the men you lost, do you ever stop seeing them?" Her gaze didn't waver. "No, but I learned to speak to them differently, not in guilt, in promise." "What kind of promise?" "That their mistakes end with me." He nodded slowly, words caught behind his teeth. For the first time in years he felt something close to peace, a fragile flickering thing but real. A radio crackled suddenly, breaking the calm. Lopez's voice, movement east side, multiple contacts. Evelyn was on her feet instantly. Positions. Marcus grabbed his rifle. Shapes emerged through the dark, 3, maybe 4 figures, hands raised. Refugees, civilians. One carried a child wrapped in cloth. The tension eased as quickly as it spiked. Lopez lowered his weapon. They must have been hiding in the canyons. Evelyn stepped forward, scanning them. The oldest man spoke in broken English. "Trucks, fire, many dead, we run." She glanced at Marcus. "They're survivors from the convoy." He nodded grimly, "Which means the ambush site's near." Her jaw set. "We go at first light." When dawn returned, the desert seemed quieter, as if holding its breath. The team moved with caution, following the civilians' directions back toward the canyon's northern edge. Scattered debris soon marked the ground: burned tires, twisted metal, the black skeletons of transport trucks. Evelyn knelt beside one wreck, fingers brushing over a melted insignia. "Our convoy," she said softly. Marcus scanned the cliffs. "Whoever did this knew exactly when we'd pass." She rose slowly, dusting her hands. "Then someone fed them that schedule." A chill rippled through him, inside the base. "Possibly," her eyes narrowed. "Find what you can, we'll bring truth home." As they fanned out, the wind carried the smell of scorched oil and something older, betrayal lingering in the air. And as Marcus lifted a fragment of radio casing marked with the outpost's encrypted frequency, he felt the ground shift beneath his certainty. Someone within their own ranks had sold them out. Evelyn's voice floated across the ruins, low and certain. "This isn't over." For the first time, Marcus believed her, not because she was Admiral Cross, but because behind that calm he could hear a promise forged in loss. The mission had changed. Now it wasn't about orders or enemies. It was about trust, what breaks it, what rebuilds it, and what both must sacrifice to find it again. How do you serve a flag when someone beneath it betrays the people who fight for it? That thought followed Marcus all the way back through the desert. Each step ground dust into his boots and questions into his skull. The heat felt heavier now, like the sky itself was pressing down, waiting for him to break. They returned to the outpost at dusk. The gates clanged open, guards saluting stiffly as Evelyn Cross led the column inside. No celebration, no noise. Just tired eyes watching their commander march home with smoke still clinging to her uniform. Commander Reeves met them on the tarmac. "Report." "2 wounded," Evelyn said. "No fatalities, the convoy's gone." Her voice was clipped, contained. Only Marcus, standing behind her, saw the tightness in her jaw. "We found traces of encrypted transmission hardware near the ambush zone. Military grade. Ours." Reeves froze. "You're saying?" "I'm saying someone inside this base handed them our schedule." She let the words hang. "Find who." Reeves swallowed, understood. But Marcus saw the flicker in the man's eyes, fear, maybe, or guilt. Hard to tell. He had learned that officers wore masks better than armor. That night, Evelyn sat in the operations tent, staring at the map illuminated by a single lamp. She traced her finger along the canyon routes again, over and over, as if repetition might force the truth to surface. She didn't look up when Marcus entered. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I brought the debris sample." He set a small evidence pouch on the table, twisted metal stamped with the base's comm frequency. "That's the transmitter casing." Her eyes flicked to it. "You're certain?" "Yes, ma'am, and whoever used it wiped the serials clean." She leaned back, rubbing her temple. Then they knew exactly what they were doing. Marcus hesitated. "Permission to speak freely." "Granted." "You think it's Reeves?" Her gaze lifted slowly to his. "You're blunt, Private." "I'm tired of watching men die for other people's secrets." A faint smile ghosted across her face. "So am I." For a long moment neither spoke. The generator hummed outside. Somewhere a dog barked, the lonely sound echoing through steel walls. Then Evelyn said almost to herself, "Truth costs more than silence. Always has." He frowned. "Then why pay it?" "Because silence kills slower," she murmured, "but it still kills." The next morning brought sandstorms, thick orange clouds rolling across the horizon, swallowing sun and sky alike. Inside the command wing, visibility dropped to meters. It was the kind of day the desert used to bury secrets. Reeves called for a restricted meeting. Only senior officers and Evelyn were allowed inside. Marcus waited outside the tent, restless. Through the fabric walls he could hear fragments, words like insubordination, containment, classified chain. Every syllable sounded like a wall being built around truth. After an hour the tent flap opened. Reeves stormed out, jaw tight, eyes avoiding everyone. Evelyn followed seconds later, expression unreadable. Marcus stepped forward. "Ma'am." She shook her head once. "Not here." Then lower. "Walk with me." They left the compound, the storm whipping at their uniforms. Sand hissed against metal, obscuring them from distant eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was rough. "They've locked down the investigation." "Locked down?" Marcus echoed. "Why?" "Because it leads upward," she said. "Too far upward." He stared. "You mean command?" "I mean someone with clearance high enough to access convoy schedules." Her tone hardened. "Reeves tried to bury the report, said it would compromise morale. I told him morale doesn't survive lies. And he reminded me that admirals don't survive defiance." The wind howled between them. Marcus clenched his fists. "So what now?" Her eyes met his. "Now we find proof before proof disappears." They began quietly. Evelyn assigned Marcus to logistics review, on paper a punishment. In practice, access to the shipment manifests. For 3 days he combed through data sheets, signal logs, maintenance rosters. Most entries were routine, until one line caught his eye: a transfer of communication repair parts, signed by Reeves himself, dated 2 days before the ambush. The parts matched the transmitter casing they'd found. He copied the entry and slipped it into his pocket. That night, he found Evelyn outside the hangar, alone, watching the sand settle after sunset. "I think I have something," he said, handing her the paper. Her eyes scanned the page. He authorized it. "Under a maintenance request that doesn't exist," Marcus added. "Check the requisition number, it's fabricated." She folded the sheet carefully, sliding it into her jacket. "Good work." He exhaled. "So we expose him?" "Not yet." Her tone sharpened. "We do this clean. If we go to command without a chain of evidence, they'll bury both of us." "You trust me to keep it quiet?" "I have to," she said simply. "There's no one else I can." That admission landed heavier than any order. The next day, things shifted. Reeves began watching them. Conversations ended when Marcus entered a room. Schedules changed without notice. Even the mess hall felt colder. Rumors spread faster than bullets, that the Admiral was overstepping, that she planned to strip ranks, that she was being replaced. Fear always finds an ally in gossip. Late that night, Marcus woke to the sound of movement outside his quarters. He grabbed his sidearm and opened the door. Nothing but shadows. Yet on the floor lay a folded note, pressed under a spent shell casing. 3 words written inside: "They know, leave." His pulse spiked. He slipped into boots and headed straight for Evelyn's quarters. She answered the knock instantly, as if she hadn't been sleeping at all. He showed her the note. She read it, face calm but eyes dark. "They're accelerating." "Then we need to go public, ma'am, now." She shook her head. "No, panic helps them, not us." "Then what?" he snapped, the frustration breaking through. "Wait until they frame us for it." Her voice rose, quiet but sharp. "You think I haven't considered that?" The silence afterward was jagged. He lowered his gaze. "Sorry." She exhaled, the anger dissolving into exhaustion. "Don't apologize for caring too much. Just don't let it cloud your judgment." He nodded. "What's the plan?" "We call a false inspection," she said after a beat. "A routine systems audit. Under that cover, we'll access the comm array logs, see who transmitted the schedule. If Reeves' code shows up, that's our proof." "When?" "Tomorrow at 600. Morning came brittle and gray. Clouds choked the sky. The sun felt distant. Marcus and Evelyn moved through the base like ghosts, clipboards in hand, the perfect image of bureaucratic monotony. Guards barely looked twice as they entered the comm station. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The air smelled of hot wiring and coffee gone stale. Marcus plugged into the central terminal while Evelyn stood watch by the door. "Accessing encrypted logbook," he murmured. "Give me a sec." Lines of code flickered across the screen: timestamps, transmission bursts, call signatures. Most routine. Then one entry blinked red. An unscheduled outgoing ping, coded to a restricted channel, exactly 1 hour before the ambush. The sender ID, CR-27. Marcus looked up. CR-27, that's Reeves, Evelyn finished quietly. Her jaw clenched. Copy the log. He pulled a drive from his pocket, loaded the file and slid it into his vest. Got it. They turned to leave and froze. Reeves stood in the doorway, 2 MPs behind him. Going somewhere, Admiral? He asked, voice like gravel. Evelyn didn't flinch. Routine audit. He smiled thinly. Without clearance, that's insubordination. Marcus stepped forward. We found your transmission logs, sir. You sold us out. Reeves's smile never wavered. Careful, Private. False accusations have consequences. Not as many as betrayal, Marcus shot back. The MPs raised their rifles. Evelyn's hand lifted slightly. Control, not surrender. Commander, she said evenly, you're under arrest for treason pending tribunal. He laughed. You have no jurisdiction. Then why are you afraid? She asked. For the first time, his composure cracked. You don't understand, Cross. You think this ends with me. You're pulling on a wire that runs straight to Fleet Command. Then let it run, she said. We'll see where it leads. He lunged toward the console. Marcus moved first, grabbing him, slamming him back against the wall. The echo filled the room, sharp, metallic. For a moment, it mirrored the first time he'd done that to her. The irony stung. Evelyn's voice was calm steel. Stand down, Private. He released Reeves, breathing hard. Take him, she ordered. The MPs hesitated, uncertain whom to obey. She stepped closer, eyes narrowing. That's an order. After a tense beat, they cuffed Reeves and dragged him out. When the room fell silent again, Marcus exhaled. What did he mean, Fleet Command? Evelyn stared at the door where Reeves had disappeared. It means this isn't over. He was just the messenger. That night the base was electric with rumor. Half believed Reeves was guilty. The other half believed the Admiral had staged a coup. Orders clashed, communications were rerouted, tempers flared. Evelyn stood by the window of her quarters, watching lightning flicker over the desert. Marcus entered quietly, closing the door behind him. They're saying command, sending an inquiry team, he said, within 24 hours. She nodded. Of course they are. They need a scapegoat. Us? Probably. He hesitated. You could still walk away, ma'am. Claim Reeves acted alone. Her gaze turned toward him, steady, heavy with fatigue. If I walk away, the truth dies, and I've buried enough. Marcus swallowed. Then I'm with you. You don't have to be. I know. Something softened in her face then, not warmth exactly, but recognition. You've changed, Private. So have you. A small, tired smile. Maybe we're both still changing. Thunder rolled outside, distant and low. She turned back to the window. Tomorrow, when the inquiry arrives, they'll ask for the data, hide the drive somewhere safe. Where? She looked at him. Where no one thinks to look, among the ordinary. He nodded, pocketing it. You trust me with this. I trusted you once and you shoved me into a wall, she said quietly. Now I'm trusting you again. Don't make me regret either. He almost smiled. Yes, ma'am. Hours later, the storm broke fully. Rain hammered the desert, rare, violent, cleansing. Marcus walked the perimeter alone, water dripping from his cap. He reached the maintenance bay, opened a fuel casing and sealed the drive inside a hollow compartment. Then he leaned back, breathing the scent of wet dust. Somewhere behind him, footsteps approached. He turned sharply, nothing but rain. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that eyes watched from the dark. Inside her quarters, Evelyn sat at her desk, writing a message she might never send. If truth burns me, let it light the way for someone braver. She folded the note, tucked it into her pocket, and stared at the horizon until the rain swallowed the world. Because she knew storms never end the story. They only reveal who's still standing when the air clears. And tomorrow, When command arrived, she and Marcus would discover whether courage could survive politics, or whether integrity would be the next casualty of war. What happens when truth becomes a threat? That question waited at the gates long before the inquiry team arrived. By sunrise, the rain had passed, leaving the outpost slick and shining under pale light. The air carried that rare, clean scent: wet metal, sand, diesel, and something else: dread. Admiral Evelyn Cross stood at the edge of the tarmac, hands clasped behind her back, watching the incoming convoy approach. 3 armored transports, their matte paint still gleaming from recent refit. The kind of vehicles command sent when they wanted presence, not conversation. Marcus stood a few meters away, helmet tucked under his arm, jaw locked. He'd been awake all night, replaying her words. Hide the drive where no one thinks to look. It was buried deep in the maintenance bay, invisible under dust and oil. Safe for now. The convoy stopped. Out stepped Rear Admiral Clayton Reddick, broad-shouldered, silver hair, eyes like winter steel. His uniform looked too crisp for this place. 2 aides flanked him, tablets in hand. The soldiers nearby stiffened instinctively. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. "Admiral Cross," Reddick said, voice smooth but sharp. "I wish we met under better circumstances." "So do I, sir," she replied, tone polite, unreadable. He glanced around. "Commander Reeves is in custody, I hear." "Yes, on charges of treason and collusion with hostile elements." A small smirk tugged at his mouth. Strong words, given the absence of trial. "There's evidence." "I'll be the judge of that," he said, literally. Marcus shifted slightly, his knuckles white around his helmet. Reddick's gaze snapped to him. "And you are?" "Private Marcus Hale, sir." Reddick studied him for a beat. "Ah, the soldier who had an altercation with Admiral Cross, was it not?" Evelyn's voice cut in, calm but firm. "That matter was resolved internally." Reddick's eyes twinkled with something between amusement and warning. "Everything is internal until it isn't, Admiral. Remember that." He turned away, gesturing for his team to follow. "Let's begin." The inquiry took over the command center like a slow invasion. Every terminal, every report, every corridor now bore the tension of surveillance. Officers whispered. Guards lingered longer than usual. Marcus could feel the air itself growing tight, as if the base was holding its breath. Evelyn sat in the interrogation room for hours, flanked by 2 legal officers who looked barely out of academy. Reddick asked questions that sounded polite but cut like scalpels. "Why did you personally lead the canyon operation?" "Because drones failed to reveal ambush positions." "You had no clearance to engage." "I had responsibility to protect." "And yet 2 soldiers were injured." "They're alive because of that decision." Reddick's pen scratched across paper. "You assume responsibility easily, Admiral. That can be dangerous." Her expression didn't change. "It's part of the job." He leaned back. "And Commander Reeves?" "In custody. His transmission code was traced to the ambush." "Where is this proof you claim?" She met his eyes, secured. "By whom?" She didn't answer. The silence stretched. Reddick smiled faintly. "That's what I thought." He stood, gathering his notes. "We'll reconvene this evening. In the meantime, you'll remain confined to quarters. Standard procedure." Evelyn rose slowly, eyes unwavering. "Understood." But Marcus, waiting outside the room, saw the small tremor in her fingers when she emerged, the kind that came not from fear, but from restraint. By midday, rumors exploded. Some said she'd been relieved of command. Others swore she was under arrest. Marcus knew neither was true yet, but truth and rumor often looked alike in uniform. He found her in her quarters, standing by the small window, watching the storm clouds reform over the desert. Her jacket hung neatly over a chair. The Admiral's stars gleamed faintly on the collar, symbols now heavier than iron. "They're going to make Reeves a scapegoat," she said quietly. And then me. He shut the door behind him. We can still show them the drive. Not yet, she said. Not until I know who else is watching. Reddick. Maybe higher, her voice lowered. You saw how fast they came. Someone warned them we were close. Marcus frowned. You think Reeves was working for them? I think Reeves was just convenient. The real betrayal doesn't wear guilt, it wears authority. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the air unit filled the silence. Finally, he said, "What if we leak it?" She turned to whom? The press, civilian media, someone outside command. Her look was sharp, almost pitying. That's not how this world works, Private. Out here, leaks don't reach truth. They drown in spin. He stared at her. So what do we do? Just stand here while they erase you? Her jaw tightened. We move carefully. There's still one man on the inquiry I trust, Colonel Nevin. Served under me once. If he's still the same man, he'll listen. And if he's not? Then we'll adapt, she said simply. That evening, the inquiry resumed. Marcus wasn't allowed inside, but he watched from the hallway through the narrow glass panel. Reddick stood at the head of the table, voice carrying authority that didn't need to shout. Admiral Cross, he said, we've reviewed your field decisions, your breach of operational protocol, and your unauthorized detainment of a senior officer. These actions indicate either gross insubordination or deliberate manipulation of command integrity. Her tone stayed even. The evidence disproves that. Then produce it. I will, once this tribunal confirms impartial review. Reddick smiled thinly. That's not your decision. The tension in the room felt alive. Colonel Nevin, tall, quiet, weathered, shifted slightly, eyes moving between them. Reddick noticed. Colonel, he said, something to add. Nevin's voice was slow, gravelly. Just a question, sir. If the evidence exists, why the rush to conclude before verifying it? Reddick's jaw twitched. Because time matters. Truth matters more, Nevin said. The silence that followed was dense. Evelyn's gaze flicked toward Nevin, a faint nod of acknowledgement. Reddick exhaled sharply. We'll adjourn until tomorrow. As she rose to leave, Reddick's tone softened, too soft. Careful, Evelyn, you've always been brave. Don't let that turn into foolishness. Her reply was quiet but final. Bravery and foolishness are often mistaken for each other by those who have forgotten what courage costs. Later that night, Marcus found her in the observation tower overlooking the airfield. The desert stretched endless, dotted with faint lights. Her shoulders were hunched slightly, her hands resting on the railing. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked tired, not physically, but soul-tired. You did good in there, he said softly. She glanced sideways. Watching through the glass were you. Couldn't help it. Her faint smile didn't reach her eyes. I thought maybe Nevin still had a conscience. He does, Marcus said. He spoke up. For now. She turned back toward the horizon. The wind caught her hair, loose around her face. You ever wonder why men like Reddick rise so high? He frowned. Because they follow orders. No, she said. Because they give others just enough illusion of order to hide their fear. Real command isn't power, Hale. It's burden. And some men can't carry it without breaking others to lighten the load. He watched her for a long moment. You don't deserve what they're doing. Her voice softened. Deserve has nothing to do with it, duty does. Silence fell between them again. A helicopter blinked across the distance, red lights pulsing like a heartbeat. Somewhere in the dark, a generator whined. Then she said quietly, if this ends the way I think it will, I need you to promise me something. Anything. If command tries to erase this, if they bury the truth, you take that drive and get it out. No matter what happens to me. He shook his head. Don't talk like that. Promise me, Marcus. Her use of his first name hit harder than any order. He swallowed. I promise. She nodded once. Then maybe this won't all be for nothing. By dawn, Reddick made his move. A formal order came through. Evelyn Cross was to be relieved of command pending further review. The official reason: compromised judgment in field operations. Marcus read the memo twice, rage simmering beneath disbelief. Around him, soldiers whispered in corridors, avoiding his eyes. Some pitied him, others just wanted distance from the fallout. He went straight to her quarters, but two armed MPs stood at the door. "By order of Rear Admiral Reddick," one said, "Admiral Cross is under confinement." Marcus clenched his fists. "She's not a criminal. Orders are orders." He turned away before his anger got the better of him. Inside, Evelyn sat on her bunk, cuffs loose around her wrists. Her thoughts were quieter than the chains. She'd expected this. Still, the weight of humiliation of being doubted by those she'd bled for carved deeper than she'd imagined. When Reddick entered, she didn't rise. "Dignified as ever," he said, "even in disgrace." She met his gaze calmly. "You've wanted this from the start." He smiled faintly. "No, I wanted stability. You brought chaos. Idealists always do. You call integrity chaos. I call it inconvenient." He circled the small room slowly. "You think you can expose command corruption. You're one name against an institution, and the boy who worships you won't save you. He'll burn with you." She tilted her head. "You're afraid of him." "Of a private," he laughed. "Of what he represents," she said. "The moment soldiers like him stop obeying blindly, men like you lose your kingdoms." His smile vanished. "You'll break, Evelyn," he said coldly. "Everyone does." She leaned forward, voice low. "Not everyone kneels." That night, Marcus made his choice. He waited until the guards changed shift, then slipped through the maintenance bay, heartbeat thudding in his ears. The drive was still there, untouched. He tucked it into a waterproof pouch, secured it inside his vest, and made his way toward the comms outpost at the northern ridge, the only transmitter not yet under inquiry control. Halfway there, a voice cut through the dark. "Stop right there, Hale." It was Reddick's aide, flanked by two soldiers, rifles raised. Marcus froze. The aide stepped closer. Admiral Reddick anticipated this, hand over the data. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Can't do that." The aide sighed. "You're throwing your life away for her." "Maybe, but at least I'll remember what it was worth." The moment stretched, then Marcus moved fast. A burst of dust, a flash of struggle. The rifle went off once, echoing across the sand. Then silence. When the smoke cleared, Marcus was gone. Back in her cell, Evelyn sat up as alarms began to wail across the base. Lights flashed red through the narrow window. The guard outside shouted into his radio, chaos, confusion. She closed her eyes briefly. He'd done it. A single tear cut through the grit on her cheek, though her lips curved faintly, not in victory, but in faith. Because she knew the truth had left the walls that tried to cage it. And somewhere out there, under the weight of desert stars, a soldier was running, not from command, not from war, but toward something rarer than survival. Toward redemption. How far can loyalty run before it turns into exile? The siren still screamed long after the gunfire stopped. Marcus ran. Sand kicked up behind him, stinging his face, burning his throat. The desert stretched endless, no cover, no mercy, only wind and silence broken by distant shouts from the base. He didn't look back. He couldn't. Every instinct screamed, keep moving. In his vest pocket, the data drive pressed against his ribs like a heartbeat. Proof of betrayal, proof of truth, proof that Evelyn Cross had been right all along. Somewhere behind him, a searchlight swept across the dunes. He dropped to the ground, crawling under the jagged remains of a wrecked drone half buried in the sand. The light passed. He waited, counting breaths, waiting for the silence to return. When it did, he exhaled shakily. "You said get it out," he whispered to himself. "I'm trying." He pushed forward again, each step dragging through exhaustion. The stars blurred. The desert at night was cruel, cold enough to bite through bone, loud with its emptiness. Yet in that void he felt strangely alive. He wasn't running from something anymore. He was running for something. Back at the outpost, chaos replaced order. Floodlights cut through darkness. Drones buzzed overhead. Rear Admiral Reddick stood in the control room, jaw clenched, eyes on the tracking monitor. "Perimeter patrols have nothing," an officer said. "Then widen the grid," Reddick snapped. "He can't have gone far." A beat, then another voice. "Sir, the Northridge transmitter just went offline." Reddick's expression hardened. "He's heading for comms. He means to broadcast." He turned sharply. "Deploy intercept teams and bring Admiral Cross to me." The officer hesitated. "She's confined, sir." "Then unconfine her," Reddick hissed. "If she wants to protect him, she can watch him fail." They dragged her into the command center minutes later. Wrists bound, hair loose, eyes steady. The men around her avoided eye contact. Something about her silence unsettled them. Reddick gestured to the map. "Your prodigal private is attempting treason." "Treason?" Her voice was calm. "Funny word for trying to tell the truth." He ignored that. If he sends those files, everything collapses: morale, trust, chain of command. "Maybe it's time it did," she said quietly. He slammed a fist on the table. "Do you even hear yourself?" She met his gaze evenly. Every word. For a second the old iron mask slipped from his face. She saw what lay beneath, not confidence but fear. Not of her, but of exposure. "You'll regret this," he whispered. "I already do," she said. Miles away, Marcus reached the northern ridge. The communications tower loomed above him, a skeletal frame of metal silhouetted against the dying stars. He climbed fast, muscles screaming. Each rung vibrated with the hum of the wind. At the top, he connected the drive to the auxiliary terminal. The system flickered alive, lights blinking uncertainly. He hesitated, breath ragged. "Come on, come on." A prompt appeared. "Authentication required." Of course it did. High-level clearance only, Evelyn's level. He stared at the screen, despair flooding in. He'd come all this way, carried her faith on his back, and now a single locked gate stood between truth and silence. Then he remembered her voice from the canyon. "Courage is learning to stand after you've fallen." He took a breath, opened the encrypted logs, and started guessing. Her old fleet codes, her ID numbers, her birth date, nothing worked. Below, headlights streaked across the desert, vehicles closing fast. He typed again, slower this time, not with logic but instinct. What would she choose as her code? He typed 3 letters. NVK. Norvek. The system blinked. Then opened. "Of course you did," he whispered, a tired smile tugging his lips. He hit transmit. A loading bar appeared. UPLNKING 12%. Down below, the first vehicle stopped. Soldiers poured out, rifles raised. Shots cracked through the night, echoing off metal. Marcus ducked. Sparks showered from the tower frame. He stayed low, shielding the console with his body. The progress bar crawled upward: 38%, 41%, 47%. Another burst of gunfire. A bullet tore through his sleeve. He bit back a shout. He looked toward the horizon and froze. Another light, distant but moving fast. A helicopter, military. For a heartbeat, he thought it was theirs. Then the radio in his ear crackled with static, and a voice, steady and familiar, broke through. "Hale, do you copy?" His heart lurched. "Admiral." "Copy." "Hell." "Never mind that," she said. "You need to move. Reddick's closing in." "I can't," he said. "Transmission at 50. If you stay, you'll die." "Then I'll die doing something that matters." Silence, then a faint exhale, stubborn to the end. "Guess I learned from you." For the first time she almost laughed, the sound half broken, half proud. "Then keep your head down, soldier." He smiled. "Yes, ma'am." The line went dead. Below, the searchlight swept upward. The tower shook under gunfire. He crouched lower, eyes fixed on the screen. 74%, 81%, 89%. Then the power cut. The tower plunged into darkness. No, no, no. He slammed a fist against the console. The hum of the generator died completely. He looked down. A figure stood by the base of the tower, cutting the main line, Reddick's aide. Marcus raised his rifle, aimed through the gap, fired once. The spark of the muzzle flashed against the dark. The man fell. The tower lights flickered back, emergency backup. Transmission resumed. 90%, 92%, 95%. But now they were climbing after him. He turned, firing down the ladder, every shot echoing like thunder. The wind roared. His breath came ragged, shallow. 98%, 99%, 100%. Upload complete. The console chimed softly, a fragile sound swallowed by chaos. He pulled the drive free, tucked it into his vest, and slid down the ladder just as a grenade detonated near the base. The blast threw him backward. The world spun. Heat seared his arm. He hit the ground hard. He lay there dazed, stars spinning above. The tower groaned, its structure warped, but it still stood, a steel witness to what he'd done. Hands grabbed him, rough and fast. Someone shouted orders. The world blurred into noise and motion. When consciousness returned, everything hurt. His wrists were bound, his head a dull roar. He was back inside the outpost, inside a holding cell. Outside the bars stood Reddick. "Well," the man said, voice calm as ice. "Congratulations. You got your little message out. It lasted 3 minutes before command intercepted it." Marcus blinked groggily. "Intercepted?" "Oh yes. The fleet runs the satellites, boy. Nothing leaves without their blessing. All you accomplished was treason." Marcus closed his eyes. "It's still out there." "Maybe," Reddick said. "But no one will believe it came from anywhere but a desperate grunt and a disgraced admiral." He leaned closer to the bars. "Do you know what happens now?" "Execution," Marcus muttered. Reddick smiled faintly. "We're not barbarians, you'll disappear, quietly. No graves, no questions." He turned to leave and froze. Evelyn stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 MPs, uncuffed. "Release him," she said. Reddick's eyes narrowed. "On whose authority?" "Fleet Command," she replied evenly. "They received the transmission before you killed the power. They verified the data, and they want to speak to you." The color drained from his face. "You're lying." She stepped forward, handing him a datapad. "Read it." He snatched it, eyes darting across the screen. Then his breath caught. "Impossible," he whispered. "They wouldn't." "They did," she said. "You're under arrest for obstruction of justice, falsifying reports, and aiding enemy infiltration." The MPs moved fast. He struggled once, then froze when he saw her expression, not vindictive, just sad. "You'll never clean this system, Evelyn," he hissed. "Cut off one head, another grows." "Then I'll keep cutting," she said softly. They dragged him away. Later, in the same quiet cell, Marcus sat on the bunk, head bowed. The door clicked open. Evelyn stepped inside. He looked up. "You're free." "So are you," she said. "Fleet cleared you." They had to. The evidence forced their hand. Reeves's confession, the logs, your transmission, all of it painted a picture they couldn't erase. He shook his head slowly. "So we won." Her eyes softened. "There are no victories like this, only survivors." He gave a faint laugh, half broken. "You sound like my old sergeant." "Maybe he was right," she said. She sat beside him, the silence between them heavy but not uncomfortable. "You disobeyed orders, risked your life, and nearly got yourself killed. Would you rather I had?" "No," she admitted, But don't make a habit of it." He smiled faintly. "Yes, ma'am." After a moment she added quietly, "When the power died, I thought you were gone." "I almost was." Her gaze met his steady, unguarded. "You didn't have to do this for me." "I didn't," he said. "I did it because you taught me what real command looks like." Something in her chest ached at that, not pain exactly, but the ache of recognition. The reminder that influence wasn't in stripes or stars, but in the courage you inspired in others. The following day, the desert was calm again. The inquiry team packed up. Reddick's transport lifted off under heavy guard, its shadow crawling across the sand before fatting into the sky. Evelyn and Marcus stood by the airstrip, side by side. The wind carried grit across their boots. "So what now?" he asked. "Now," she said, "we rebuild. The base needs new leadership. You'll help with that." He blinked. "Me? You're promoted, Sergeant Hale." He stared. "You're joking." "Do I look like I joke?" He grinned despite himself. "Not often." "Then take the rank," she said. "You earned it." He saluted. For the first time she returned it crisp, genuine, unguarded. As the last transport vanished into the horizon, she said softly, "They'll come again, you know, men like him." "I know," Marcus said, "but now they'll know we're watching." She nodded, looking out at the endless expanse of desert. Sometimes leadership isn't about commanding, it's about refusing to bow. "And sometimes following isn't obedience," he said, "it's trust." Her eyes met his. "Exactly." The wind rose, carrying their words into the distance. That night she walked the empty corridor, the same one where it had all begun. The same cracked wall, the same faint smell of oil and dust. She stopped, running her hand over the rough surface, the memory alive beneath her palm. Back then, a soldier's anger had met a leader's restraint. Now both had changed. She smiled faintly, whispered to the silence, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." Outside, the desert stars returned bright, unwavering, infinite. And somewhere among them, the echoes of forgiveness, courage, and truth lingered like radio waves traveling forever, proof that even in war, mercy could still find its way home. What does victory look like when it costs the part of you that believed in simple heroes? The sun rose clean and merciless over the outpost. Everything looked the same, tense, antenna towers, the desert horizon, but nothing felt the same. Orders came again, patrols resumed, radios crackled with normal chatter. Yet beneath that fragile rhythm lay the echo of something unsettled. Evelyn Cross stood on the balcony outside the command wing, coffee cooling in her hand. The desert stretched quiet before her, the kind of stillness that only comes after chaos. She'd been reinstated officially. Commendations were drafted, ceremonies proposed, yet none of it sat right. The victory report called it a containment of internal corruption. But she knew the truth wasn't contained. It had simply gone silent again. Behind her, footsteps approached. She didn't turn. "I thought you were supposed to be resting," Marcus said. "I am," she replied, eyes still on the horizon. "You've been standing there since dawn." She smirked slightly. "Old habits." He came to stand beside her. The scar on his arm had started to fade, though the skin still looked raw under the sleeve. "They're already talking about transferring you back to Fleet Command." "So I heard." "You going?" She hesitated. "Command wants distance from this place, from me, but if I leave they'll rewrite it, turn truth into narrative." He studied her profile, the calm that never quite reached her eyes. "Then stay." She looked at him. "You offering protection, Sergeant?" He grinned. "Just company." For the first time in weeks, she let out a soft laugh. "That might be more valuable." 2 days later, the press arrived. 2 camera drones hovered over the base, projecting polished questions and scripted curiosity. Fleet Public Affairs had sent a civilian representative, a smiling woman with practiced empathy and a perfect uniform. "We just need a short interview, Admiral," she said. "Something hopeful. The people back home need a face for integrity." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "Integrity isn't a performance." "Maybe not," the woman said sweetly, "but perception keeps the funding flowing." Marcus watched from a distance, arms crossed. He could tell the conversation wasn't going well. Every time Evelyn tried to steer it toward accountability, the interviewer redirected to heroism or courage under pressure. Afterward, she walked straight to the barracks yard, tore off her cap, and exhaled hard. "They don't want the truth," she muttered. Marcus followed. "Then give them something they can't twist." She turned, and "What's that?" "Something human," he said. "Not about commands or corruption, just why you stayed when you could have walked." Her gaze lingered on him. Then, after a pause, "You think that matters?" To the one still fighting, "Yeah, it does." That night she recorded a brief statement for internal broadcast. No scripts, no staging. "This base was broken before we ever stepped into it," she said, eyes steady on the camera. "But it wasn't systems that fixed it. It was people. The ones who refused to turn away when things went wrong. The ones who didn't confuse silence for loyalty. We don't need heroes. We just need each other awake." When she finished, the comms tech stared quietly. No one applauded. They didn't need to. The words sank like stones into water, rippling outward through the ranks. Weeks passed. The desert heat thickened again. Repairs continued on the northern ridge. Reeves, awaiting tribunal, sent a single letter to Fleet Command confessing everything: his collusion, his fear, and how Reddick's influence had trapped him. The statement exonerated Evelyn publicly. It also closed the investigation entirely. One evening, she found Marcus in the motor pool, sleeves rolled, grease on his hands, helping fix a transport he didn't even need to touch. "You should be resting," she said. He smirked. "You sound like yourself 2 weeks ago." "I'm serious." He wiped his hands, leaning on the hood. "Rest doesn't sit well, not after what we saw." "Guilt, purpose," he said, "feels like there's more to fix." She nodded slowly. "There always is." He hesitated, then added, "You ever think about what comes next, for you?" "Command offered me a desk job on the carrier Resolute. Safer, political. And—" she shook her head. "I didn't fight to trade one cage for another." "You could teach," he said. "Officer Academy, train the next generation." "I'm not sure they'd want to learn from me." He looked at her seriously. "That's exactly why they should." For a long moment she said nothing. Then she smiled faintly. "You always have the last word, don't you?" "Only when I'm right." She chuckled. "Don't get used to it." That night the power flickered, brief, harmless, but it brought an old unease. Evelyn checked the systems herself, tracing the hum of generators and the glow of monitors. Everything was normal. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Too many secrets had lived inside these walls. She found herself in the same corridor, the one that began it all. The crack in the concrete was still there, faintly darker than the rest. She touched it absently, remembering his grip, her restraint, the silence that followed, the moment that had written both their fates. A soft voice came from behind her. "You ever think about that day?" She turned. Marcus leaned against the doorframe, half smiling. "Every day," she admitted. "You could have destroyed me then." "I almost did." "So why didn't you?" She looked back at the wall. "Because breaking someone never fixes anything, and because I saw something in your eyes that scared me." "What's that?" "Recognition," she said. "The same anger I used to carry before I learned how heavy it gets." He nodded slowly. "Guess I needed to see it through your eyes to understand." They stood there quietly. The hum of the bass faded into a distant rhythm, generators, voices, footsteps, life going on. Then she said softly, "You saved me too, you know." He frowned. "I don't think I did." "You reminded me why I came back," she said. Why I still believe there's something in this uniform worth protecting. He looked at her, really looked, and saw, for the first time, not just the officer who'd led him, but the person beneath it all. Tired, scarred, stubborn, still standing. "Then maybe we're even," he said. "Maybe," she murmured. Days later, orders came from Fleet Command. Admiral Cross was reassigned to a classified leadership council, an advisory post with broad oversight. The message praised her uncompromising dedication to ethical reform. She read it twice, folded it, and placed it in her desk drawer without expression. When Marcus came by, she handed him an envelope. "Your promotion came through, official this time." He opened it. "Special Recon Division. They want you leading a new unit," she said. "The kind that works between the lines." He raised a brow. "Is that their way of keeping me close or keeping me quiet?" "Both," she said honestly. He grinned. "Guess I'll take it." She extended her hand. "Then it's settled." He shook it. "Don't be a stranger, Admiral." "Wouldn't dream of it, Sergeant." As he turned to leave, she said quietly, "Marcus, don't let this place change you." He looked back. It already did, just not the way they expected. The night before she left, Evelyn visited the northern ridge alone. The sky was wide and clean again, stars sharp as glass. The tower still stood, repaired now, its metal skeleton gleaming faintly under moonlight. She placed a small plaque at its base. For those who spoke when silence was easier. Then she sat for a while, letting the wind fill the space where words used to live. Far to the south, convoy lights moved slowly across the horizon, routine patrols, life continuing. The war beyond these borders hadn't ended. It never really did, but something in her had shifted. For the first time in years, she wasn't leading out of guilt. She was leading out of belief. When she finally stood to leave, she whispered to the desert, "Let them remember what mercy looks like." Months later, across the ocean, in a Fleet Council chamber lined with flags, Admiral Cross stood before a panel of senior officers. Holograms flickered behind her, projections of new training models, accountability frameworks, revised command ethics. Boring stuff to most, but to her it was revolution. An older admiral leaned forward. "You really think this will change anything?" "No," she said. "I think it will start something. Change doesn't come from policies. It comes from people who stop pretending not to see." The man sighed. "Idealism again." She smiled slightly. "No experience." After the meeting, she stepped out onto the observation deck overlooking the harbor. Ships gleamed below, their hulls cutting clean lines across water. The city lights stretched like constellations reflected in motion. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes. The desert wind wasn't here, but she could almost feel it, hear the hum of distant rotors, smell the dust of a place that had tested and remade her. Her comm device beeped once, a message from M. Hale. "Still between the lines, still standing, M." She smiled. Back in the outpost, the wall still bore the faint mark of that long-ago shove, a crack in concrete, thin and ordinary. Recruits passed it every day, never noticing. But sometimes, when the light hit it just right, it caught a trace of gold, desert dust catching sun. To some, it was nothing. To others, it was the start of everything. Because leadership isn't the absence of failure. It's the refusal to let failure have the last word. And courage. It isn't loud. It doesn't march or shout. Sometimes, courage is a quiet woman straightening her jacket after being shoved into a wall and choosing to lead anyway. How do you hold on to integrity when the world keeps offering you safer lies? 2 months after the tribunal, the war shifted again. The borders changed, the enemy changed, even the maps changed. What didn't change was the way silence crept back into the cracks it had been driven from. Command congratulated itself, wrote new slogans, called it progress. But Evelyn Cross had seen too many reports scrubbed clean to believe it would last without a fight. She read those reports every morning, sitting alone in her fleet office overlooking the harbor. Her nameplate gleamed, her stars polished symbols that felt less like honor and more like warning. Behave. Stay within the lines. The door chimed. Come in. A young lieutenant stepped inside, nervous, holding a sealed data file. Priority transmission from Special Recon Division, ma'am. She took it, broke the seal. The message unfolded in coded bursts of text. Recon Team Bravo 3, mission compromised in Gray Range, 2 missing, extraction delayed. M. Hale. Her chest tightened. Marcus. For a long moment she stared at the message. The Council had sent him into the Gray Range, a region crawling with private militias and ghost operations no one admitted existed. It wasn't oversight, it was deliberate risk, testing the soldier who'd embarrassed command, testing her through him. She rose slowly. Prep a comlink, secure channel. The lieutenant blinked. Ma'am, that zone's off network. Then make it on network, she said. Now. Miles away, the Gray Range looked nothing like desert. It was jagged mountain and fog, cliffs cutting the clouds. Marcus crouched behind a ruined outpost, breath misting in the cold. His unit was gone, 2 taken, 1 wounded, comms jammed. The hum of drones circled overhead like vultures. He checked his rifle, then the small patch of static on his wrist receiver. Suddenly, the static cleared. Sergeant Hale, a voice came through, soft, familiar. He froze. Admiral. Copy, she said. Signals narrow. You have 2 minutes. Status. He smiled despite the blood on his sleeve. Complicated. Define complicated. Half the team captured by locals we weren't supposed to know existed. Coordinates. He looked out across the ridge. Somewhere east near the mining complex, but we've got heavier problems. The enemy's using our tech, fleet issue. Her silence spoke volumes. Then it wasn't a random strike. No, ma'am, feels like someone sold us again. She drew a breath, steady. Get your people out first, proof later. Understood. Marcus, she added quietly, you're not alone in this. He wanted to believe that, but when the line went dead again, the silence returned heavier than before. Back at fleet headquarters, Evelyn faced the council chamber once more. The room smelled of old power, air too clean, lighting too precise. Around the oval table sat admirals whose eyes reflected caution more than conviction. Reddick's seat was empty now, but his shadow remained in their words. Cross, said Admiral Servin, the chair, your involvement in ongoing field operations is irregular. My officer is missing, she said. Your former officer, he corrected. He operates autonomously now. With my teachings, she replied. Servin's expression soured. This isn't a moral crusade, it's an organization. We have procedures. Procedures built to hide mistakes, she said softly. A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. Another council member leaned forward. Evelyn, you've done good work since the inquiry, but this, interfering in field ops, this looks personal. It is personal, she said. Every life we risk should be. Servin sighed. Fine, you want clearance to assist this extraction, you'll lead it yourself, but if it fails, you're finished. She nodded once, then I won't fail. By dawn she was airborne. The transport cut through cloud, engines droning like distant thunder. She hadn't been in the field for months. The uniform felt both alien and familiar. Across from her sat a small squad, hand-picked volunteers who didn't ask questions. Their eyes followed her with quiet faith, the kind that carried weight. Mission parameters simple, she briefed. Gray Range, coordinates 38 North Delta. We get in, retrieve any survivors, secure tech samples, get out. No engagement unless fired upon. One soldier raised a hand. Ma'am, command didn't authorize retrieval of equipment, only personnel. I just did, she said. They nodded, no one argued. Outside the window, dawn bled red along the mountains. She thought of Marcus, of the anger that had once defined him, now tempered into something sharper, purpose, and of the irony that she was flying back into the kind of storm she'd spent her career trying to survive. On the ground, Marcus moved through fog, every sound magnified. He tracked the convoy carrying his captured men to a ravine near the mining facility, old tunnels reinforced with new steel, two organized to be local bandits. Through binoculars he counted at least a dozen hostiles, armed with weapons stamped with fleet serials. He whispered into his mic, though it was mostly static, "If anyone's hearing this, tell them the ghosts aren't ghosts. They're ours." He didn't know the signal had reached her. Inside the tunnel he found one of his men, Lopez, bound, bruised, alive. Marcus cut him free. "You always show up late," Lopez rasped. "Traffic," Marcus said with a grin. "Can you walk?" "Barely." "Good enough." They started toward the exit when headlights flared outside. A hum, then the slow descent of a transport, military design, fleet. Marcus raised his rifle, then froze as a figure stepped into the light. "Evelyn." For a second, disbelief broke through exhaustion. "You shouldn't be here." Her voice was calm. "You always say that right before things go wrong." He almost laughed. "You got clearance." "I got tired of asking." The extraction unfolded like a knife fight in fog, quiet, fast, brutal. Evelyn's squad neutralized the guards with surgical precision. Within minutes, the prisoners were loaded, the tech secured. But as the last rotor spun, the mining facility erupted, secondary explosions blooming through the tunnels. Marcus turned. "They rigged it." "Go," she shouted. The blast wave hit like thunder. The transport lurched upward, metal shrieking. She clung to the railing, pain flaring in her shoulder. Marcus grabbed her, pulling her inside as smoke swallowed the ridge. The craft rose above the firestorm, tilting, stabilizing. The mountains below burned orange against the dawn. Breathing hard, Evelyn looked at him. "Next time, leave the dramatics to me." He smiled weakly. "Yes, ma'am." She touched her calm. "Command, this is Cross. Extraction successful. Send medevac units to Grid 38 North Delta. Facility compromised, evidence secured." Static, then a voice, "Servants." "Acknowledged, return to base." Something in his tone made her uneasy. Back at Fleet HQ, the reception was colder than the mountains had been. No applause, no commendations, just quiet corridors and closed doors. Evelyn handed over the data, proof that the Gray Range facility was run by a covert branch of Fleet's own weapons division. Command called it rogue elements. She called it hypocrisy. Servan summoned her the next day. "You went beyond your brief," he said. "I saved our men. You also exposed classified operations. Illegal ones." He leaned back. "Evelyn, you've done this twice now, Reddick, and now this. You're making enemies who won't forgive you." "I don't need forgiveness." He studied her for a long moment. "You'll never make Admiral of Fleet this way." "I never wanted to." He sighed. "You're dismissed. Effective tomorrow, advisory role suspended pending review." She stood, understood. As she turned to leave, he added quietly, "You can't fix a machine that was built to eat its own." She paused at the door. "Then maybe it's time to build something else." Outside, the air smelled of rain again. She walked the pier, letting the wind cool the fire inside her. The city shimmered across the water, too clean, too distant. Somewhere in those lights, decisions were being made that would cost lives she'd never meet. A shadow approached Marcus, in civilian clothes this time. "They grounded you," he said. "News travels fast." He handed her a small envelope. "You still have allies. This came through back channels." Inside were photos, evidence from the facility, fleet markings visible, proof of her claims. She looked up. "You risked a lot bringing this." He shrugged. "Guess I'm still bad at following orders." For a while they just stood there, waves slapping against the hulls. Then he said quietly, "You know, when I shoved you into that wall, I thought I was standing up for what was right." "And now," she asked. "Now I think maybe standing up means something else. Not anger, persistence." She smiled faintly. "You finally sound like an officer." "Don't ruin it," he said, grinning. She laughed softly, the sound caught by the wind. Weeks later, the report leaked. No one knew how, maybe a clerk, maybe fate, but the images hit the public channels before Fleet could bury them. Talk shows, news feeds, headlines. Gray Range facility linked to unauthorized arms program. The council scrambled. Investigations reopened. Reassignments followed. Evelyn's suspension was quietly lifted, but no one called to tell her. She found out from a line at the bottom of a memo. She returned to the outpost one last time. It looked smaller now, almost peaceful. The recruits saluted as she passed, eyes filled with stories they hadn't yet lived. Marcus met her near the same cracked wall, still marked faintly by time. "Back where it started," he said. "Seems that way." He nodded toward the horizon. "So what now?" She took a breath. "They offered me command of a new program. Independent ethics oversight for field operations. It's not glamorous. It's important." She looked at him. "And you?" "I'm heading east, quiet postings, teaching field discipline." She smiled, passing it on. "Trying to." A gust of wind swept through the corridor, carrying dust and sunlight together. He said softly, "You know, I used to think courage was never backing down. And now? Now I think it's knowing when to stand still." She nodded. "Then we finally agree." That evening, the base lights flickered on one by one, glowing against the encroaching dark. Evelyn stood alone by the tower where he'd once risked everything. The plaque at its base glinted under starlight. She whispered, still standing. Because even after all the reports, the politics, the betrayals, that's what they had left. Not medals, not titles, just the quiet certainty that they had not looked away. And somewhere beyond the horizon, another convoy moved through the dark, led by a man who had once been a private with too much anger, now a soldier with just enough faith. He still carried her voice in his ear like a compass. And she, somewhere far away, carried his defiance like a promise. How do you measure a life when medals fade, and the noise of war is gone? 10 years passed. The desert changed its shape again. Roads cut through dunes, towers rose where tents once stood, and the old outpost became a training academy. Recruits ran drills on the same ground where silence had once held its breath. The crack in the wall was still there, painted over but never gone. A scar in concrete, the kind that keeps memory honest. Evelyn Cross walked those halls slowly, cane tapping against the polished floor. Age hadn't dulled her voice, it had deepened it. She wore no rank now, only a plain uniform jacket, its pockets filled with notes and folded lesson plans. The Academy's brass plaque bore her name, Cross Leadership Institute, founded for ethical command training. She hadn't wanted her name on it. They insisted. Symbols matter, they said. Maybe they did. She'd learned symbols could also lie, but she'd learned something else too, that truth, whispered long enough, outlasts lies. She stopped by the courtyard where a class of cadets practiced formation. The instructor's voice was sharp but steady, familiar cadence, same measured authority. She smiled. "Marcus." He caught sight of her and dismissed the group. "5-minute break," he called, then crossed the yard, sweat darkening his collar. "You walk slower every year, Admiral." "I retired that title," she said. "Not to me," he replied. She laughed softly, still terrible at taking orders. Still terrible at giving them. They stood together for a while, watching the cadets scatter into shade. The air smelled of sand and coolant, the same mix as the old days, just quieter. "You ever miss it?" he asked. "The fight. The noise, the purpose." She thought about that, Sometimes, then I remember what it cost. He nodded. You taught them well, you know. These kids talk about ethics like it's part of marksmanship. Good, she said. Let them learn that hitting a target means nothing if you do know why you're pulling the trigger. He smiled faintly. You sound like you're giving a speech. Maybe I am, to myself. Later in her office, the afternoon light poured through wide windows. A stack of letters waited on her desk, cadets asking for recommendations, veterans sending thanks. She opened one, the handwriting careful but nervous. Ma'am, I was told you once forgave a man who laid hands on you in anger. My father was that man's friend. He said it changed him. I hope one day to lead like that. She folded the letter gently, heart tight with quiet pride. Forgave wasn't quite the right word, but she let it stand. Some stories were truer in other people's mouths. A knock on the door. Marcus leaned in. Got a visitor for you. She raised a brow. Another reporter. He shook his head. A student. A young woman stepped inside, straight-backed, maybe 20. Her eyes were clear, searching. Ma'am, she said, saluting. Cadet Myra Hale. Evelyn blinked. Hale. Marcus grinned behind her. Told you the name would come around again. Evelyn gestured to a chair. Your father talked you into this. He tried, the girl said. Didn't need to. I read about you both in the archives. Those files were supposed to be sealed, Evelyn said dryly. Myra smiled. Nothing stays buried forever. Evelyn studied her, the same stubborn fire, the same mix of defiance and grace. What do you want from me, cadet? Advice, the girl said. How do you know when to disobey an order? Evelyn leaned back, the cane resting across her knees. When obedience costs more lives than defiance, and when you're ready to bear what comes after. Myra nodded slowly, absorbing it. Thank you, ma'am. When she left, Marcus chuckled. Sounds familiar, doesn't she? She sounds like trouble, Evelyn said, then softer, which means she'll do fine. That night the academy quieted under a rising moon. Evelyn walked alone to the old communications tower, the one rebuilt after fire. The plaque still glinted at its base, for those who spoke when silence was easier. She ran her fingers across the engraving. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the polished metal, older now, edges softened but eyes still sharp. Behind her, Marcus approached with 2 mugs of tea. You still visit this place every night. Habit, she said, taking a sip. It listens better than most people. He sat beside her on the low concrete ledge. For a long moment they said nothing. The wind whispered through the antenna cables, a sound like distant voices. Do you ever think we made a difference? He asked. She smiled faintly. If you're asking that, we probably did. He looked out at the dark horizon. They'll never know half of what happened. They don't need to, she said. They just need to inherit the right half. He chuckled softly. You should write that down. I just did, she said, tapping her temple. A shooting star cut the sky above the desert, bright and brief. Remember what you told me that night in the cell? He asked. I told you a lot of things. You said you trusted me, not to make you regret it. And he smiled. I think I did all right. She reached over, resting a hand on his shoulder. You did more than that. They sat there until the wind grew cold. Neither wanted to leave first. Years later, the world moved on again. Conflicts cooled, new ones simmered. The academy thrived. Cadets graduated carrying lessons written not in manuals, but in the quiet stories passed between mentors and recruits. The Admiral who chose mercy, the soldier who learned discipline through forgiveness. When Evelyn Cross died, she left behind no orders, only a note. If truth costs peace, pay it. If peace costs conscience, refuse it. And if silence ever feels easier, speak anyway. Her funeral drew thousands. Fleet banners lined the pier, flags bowed low. Marcus stood at the front, uniform pressed, eyes dry but aching. He placed her cane beside the folded flag and whispered, You're still leading even now." Afterward, he returned to the Desert Academy. The classrooms buzzed with life again, cadets debating ethics, instructors quoting her lines like scripture. He found Myra teaching a group of new recruits by the same cracked wall. "What are you telling them?" he asked. She smiled. "That strength without discipline is weakness. Anger without cause is chaos." He nodded. "Good line." "Not mine," she said, "hers." He looked at the wall, then at the sky beyond it. "Keep saying it, it still matters." That evening, as dusk settled over the dunes, Marcus climbed the tower alone. From the top, the horizon stretched in endless gold and shadow. The wind hummed through the steel like an old song. He spoke quietly, knowing she wouldn't answer but believing she heard anyway. "You were right, Admiral. Leadership isn't about the stars. It's about standing where it hurts and not walking away." He pulled a small notebook from his pocket, the same one she'd given him years ago for lessons worth remembering. Inside were pages filled with cadet quotes, sketches, fragments of missions. On the last page he wrote, "She taught us that mercy isn't weakness. It's memory without vengeance. And that the walls we break can become the bridges we build." He closed the notebook, slipped it into his jacket, and looked toward the base. Lights flickered on one by one, tiny, steady beacons across the sand. Somewhere below, a cadet's laughter echoed, life continuing unafraid. He whispered, still standing. The desert wind carried the words outward, scattering them like dust and prayer. They would fade but not disappear. Nothing true ever really did. Far from that place, on some distant carrier slicing through night-black seas, a young officer leaned against the railing, listening to a broadcast archived from the academy. Evelyn Cross's voice, recorded years before. "Sometimes courage doesn't roar. Sometimes it's the quiet act of staying when running would be easier. Remember that. The world already has enough noise. Be the stillness that reminds others why we fight." The officer closed her eyes, the sound of waves blending with the voice, carrying it onward into another generation. In the desert, dawn came again, soft, golden, patient. The light touched the tower, the plaque, the cracked wall, and the rows of recruits running drills in the distance. And for a moment, it felt like the whole world paused to breathe. Because legacies aren't carved in stone. They live in motion, in the footsteps of those who keep walking long after the story ends. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And when it does, it leaves echoes that no war can silence.